Hi there, my name's Marlene, and yes, I was the one standing in the middle of the mall when my sister laughed at me like I didn't belong, like I was just background noise in my own life. She had no idea the staff would call me boss, no idea the company she was trying to work for was mine. But that moment, that wasn't the worst part. The real hurt? It started long before the mall, with family dinners where I was invisible, birthdays where I barely existed. A mother who handed down heirlooms like love came with conditions. You ever been treated like the backup plan in your own family? Because I have. And what happened next might just surprise you. Greenview Mall smelled like synthetic vanilla and cinnamon pretzels. The floors gleamed too bright, like they were trying to cover up how dull everything else felt. I was only there for a walkthrough, just a quiet check-in before the showroom launch next week, but I should have known better. As I walked past the center atrium, my sister's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Oh my God, look at her!" Cherie laughed, loud enough to draw eyes from the bench of teenage girls nearby. "Who even dresses like that to go shopping? She looks like she's auditioning for a job she'll never get." I didn't stop. I didn't even turn my head, but I heard it all. Her friend giggled, probably not realizing who I was. That made it worse somehow. My grip tightened around the leather strap of my crossbody bag. I had on a dark blazer and jeans, simple, efficient, professional. But to Cherie, anything that didn't sparkle or show cleavage was ripe for ridicule. A staffer from the tech booth near the pop-up showroom spotted me and rushed over. "Miss Kasmarek," he said, handing me a tablet. "We updated the floor projection based on your specs. Let me know what you think, boss." Cherie stopped mid-laugh. I felt it. A weird drop in the air, like the AC had suddenly kicked colder. My eyes met hers for half a second. Just enough. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then looked around, realizing the workers in branded black shirts were watching me, not her. That this showroom didn't just happen to bear my company's logo, it was mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just nodded politely to the staff and moved toward the back section to review display positioning. Behind me, I could hear her trying to recover, changing the subject, fake laughing, brushing it off like she hadn't just humiliated herself. But I didn't stay to witness it. I didn't have to. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to shrink me. In our family, Cherie had always been the one people noticed. The performer, the beauty, the girl who wore sequins to school events and turned every backyard barbecue into a fashion shoot. And me? I was the quiet one, the serious one, the girl who fixed the Wi-Fi and didn't mind sitting at the kid table well into my 20s. Cherie once told me, without irony, that I was born to be background music. She meant it as a joke. I smiled like it was one. I learned early how to turn silence into armor, how to measure my worth without applause. But the sting of her words still echoed, even now in my 30s, as a woman who built a tech firm from a kitchen table and turned it into a multi-million-dollar platform. And yet to her, I'd always be the boring one. I remember vividly Claudine's 60th birthday. Our mother had gathered the whole family at a fancy restaurant in uptown Charlotte. Linen tablecloths, candlelight, the works. After dessert, she made a small speech, then pulled out a box. Inside was a gold necklace passed down from her grandmother. A piece with sentimental value, something I knew she wore only on special occasions. "I want you to have it," she said, holding it out to Cherie. My heart didn't break exactly, but it did stumble. Cherie beamed. "Oh my God, Mom, it's beautiful!" I cleared my throat. "Wait, I thought that was going to be shared between us someday." Claudine just waved it off, not cruelly, but with that gentle condescension mother's perfect over time. "You're not into these things, Marlene. You don't really go out much, sweetheart." The table chuckled, and just like that, I was 12 again, opening a homemade birthday card while Cherie unwrapped a karaoke machine from Dad. There had never been enough space for both of us to shine, and I had stopped trying to elbow my way in a long time ago. Back in the present, I checked the showroom's display lighting, tapped through the digital projections, and made a few notes on the tablet. Outside the showroom glass, Cherie lingered. She wasn't laughing anymore. Her arms were crossed. Her eyebrows were furrowed. She tilted her head like she was seeing a stranger instead of her sister. I turned to speak to the floor lead, not bothering to acknowledge her. There was power in being underestimated. Later that evening, I stopped by my apartment for a late dinner. The view from my living room window stretched across the Charlotte skyline, tall glass buildings reflecting the pink-orange blur of dusk. I stood by the counter, eating reheated pasta from the night before, replaying the look on Cherie's face over and over again. It wasn't revenge I felt. It wasn't pride either. It was justice. For every time she'd called me the spinster with a laptop, for every family gathering where she joked I was probably dating my code, for every comment she whispered just loud enough to bruise. That moment in the mall didn't fix the past, but it gave me something it had taken years to claim: presence. And then, like a small cosmic wink, my phone buzzed. A notification from our internal HR system. New applicant, Cherie Brown. Position, Senior Finance Analyst. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. She had applied. To my company, to my team, unaware that the woman whose quietness she'd mocked for years would be the one reviewing her resume. I didn't sleep much that night. After rinsing my plate and setting it in the drying rack, I opened my laptop on the kitchen counter, too restless to leave it for morning. The city outside was hushed, Charlotte in its quietest form, but inside me, something stirred. Not anger, not glee, just the sharp stillness of irony finally showing its hand. I refreshed the Stratalize internal dashboard. The application still sat there. Unread, technically. I clicked. There it was. Her full name, Cherie Alexandria Brown. Her resume loaded in a single sleek PDF with gold text accents. Of course, the woman had a designer font for her name header. Senior Budget Lead, it read under her last role. I blinked. Lead? I remembered that job. She had taken it a year after her boutique line tanked. It was a quiet pivot. No grand announcements that time. Just a LinkedIn update and a few vague captions about joining the corporate climb. And now here it was, spun and reworded, crafted to sound like she'd carried the department on her back, managed quarterly audits across multi-million-dollar portfolios, guided financial strategy on emerging product lines, redefined internal budget structures. I had to hold back a laugh. She'd been a junior consultant. I knew that because I had once fixed her broken Excel sheet over Thanksgiving break. She'd asked me to help, over pie. Just make it work, she'd said, waving her fork like a wand. You're good at this boring stuff. That memory hit harder than expected. I didn't feel rage. I felt tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of the stories she told to make herself larger. And now, the joke had folded in on itself, because her oversized resume had landed squarely in my review queue. A different version of me might have flagged the application, maybe even rejected it outright. But that's not who I am. That's never been who I am. I scrolled back to the top and clicked, Advance to next round. A confirmation flashed. Application forwarded. Let's see who she is, without the spotlight. I closed my laptop, the weight of the screen settling like punctuation. But sleep still wouldn't come. I walked over to the window, arms folded. The skyline blinked softly in the distance, uptown towers glowing like coated lanterns. And just like that, I was 15 again. It was sophomore year. Our school hosted a spring showcase. Cherie had signed up for a dramatic monologue, something loud and sweeping from a Broadway show I can't remember now. I had quietly submitted a project to the science fair on the same day. Something about thermal conductivity in metals. At the end of the night, Mom brought roses. She gave them to Cherie, who was still in her stage makeup, basking in applause. I think she's really got something, Mom had whispered to Dad. No one asked about my project. I packed it back into its box myself. That's how it always was. And now, the same girl who once whispered, "You'd be nothing without a screen in front of you," was applying to work behind mine. I turned back from the window and opened Slack. A message from Derek, my co-founder, sat at the top. "Hey, just saw a Brown on the applicant list. Any relation?" I typed slowly. "Older sister. Doesn't know I'm here." He replied with a single ellipsis. Then, "Want me to pull it?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "No, let's see what happens." Later that morning, sunlight started bleeding through the blinds. I made a pot of coffee, fed the cat, and tried to move on. But the buzz wouldn't leave me. I wasn't just reviewing a resume. I was watching the same old game try to play itself in a new arena, one where I held the whistle. And I was curious, more than I wanted to admit, how Cherie would navigate a space where no one knew her name, no one worshipped her wardrobe, and no one clapped on cue. This wouldn't be her stage. It would be her test. By the time Monday rolled around, the air inside the Stratalease office felt tighter than usual. Not tense exactly, just expectant. The kind of atmosphere where something is about to happen, but no one can quite name it yet. From my home office, I opened the internal system dashboard and navigated to the building's live feed. The security camera in the main lobby gave me a clear view of the entrance. Then, right on cue, there she was, Cherie. She stepped through the glass doors with the kind of confidence only someone oblivious could carry. A light camel blazer, heels too high for comfort, hair pulled back to reveal statement earrings. She shook the receptionist's hand with a grin like she was at a networking gala. "Hi, Cherie Brown. I'm starting today." She beamed, like it was her stage debut. She hadn't changed a bit. "Still performing for applause," I murmured under my breath as I sipped lukewarm coffee. She walked down the hallway, already cracking a joke to one of the junior analysts passing by. I watched her disappear from view, into the belly of a company she knew nothing about, yet already acted like she owned. 24 hours earlier, I'd sat at the same screen with a very different kind of energy. My hand hovered over the digital approval form for new hires. Her name was there, top of the list. The HR coordinator had flagged her for fast onboarding. I clicked Approve. Under the admin notes, I quietly routed her to the finance division, under a director I trusted, someone firm but discreet. I also added an encrypted tag, EK Oversight. It gave me access to every submission she'd make without her knowing. I wasn't going to interfere. Not yet. But I wasn't going to let her roam unchecked either. She won't see me, I'd thought to myself. Not unless I want her to. Now, as I watched her settle into her desk on camera, I leaned back in my chair. My apartment still smelled like burnt toast from breakfast, and my inbox was already filling with team updates. But I couldn't look away. Later that day, around lunchtime, I caught a low murmur from the staff chat, the kind that didn't use names, just hints, a screenshot, a vague question. Then someone dropped it directly into the internal break room thread. "Hey, anyone ever seen the other co-founder?" Responses came fast. "Nope, thought it was just Derek. I heard she works remotely, or maybe she's like a ghost founder? Does she even exist?" Then came a sentence that hung there like smoke. "If she's real, why hide? That's sketchy as hell." The message was from Cherie's handle. I stared at it, blinking. So, she was already poking at the curtain. That didn't take long. The thing is, there was no rule saying I had to be visible. Derek and I had built Stratalease on a shared vision, transparency for clients, privacy for founders. I wrote the code. He shook the hands. That had always been the deal. Still, her words felt personal. Not because she doubted my presence, but because the tone hadn't changed. Even when she didn't know who she was talking about, the judgment was automatic. I let the thread die out on its own. Later in the afternoon, Cherie accessed her onboarding documents. She was assigned a budget review for Q1 adjustments, a routine task, nothing high stakes. But in the system logs, I noticed something odd. She kept opening files that weren't part of her assignment. She'd opened the legacy financial approval trail. And she'd paused on one file for 5 full minutes. The signature at the bottom, E. Kaczmarek. That signature was on almost every strategic financial directive, staff changes, equipment rollouts, contract approvals. But E. Kaczmarek didn't exist on the public org chart, not under current staff, not under the board. She was digging. In her system log, she ran a name search. No matches. I could almost hear her whispering, "So, who's running this place?" As night crept in and the building emptied out, I turned off the feed. But the image of her, eyes narrowed at her screen, mind racing, stayed with me. I had seen that look before, usually in a mirror. Back then, she was the star and I was the shadow. The girl behind the science fair project no one clapped for. The one who always had the answer but was never asked the question. And now, the roles were shifting. I should have known she'd come looking for answers, in the one place I didn't expect. After a long Tuesday of back-to-back virtual check-ins, I found myself still restless well past 9 p.m., the kind of restlessness that didn't come from caffeine or a missed meal, but from tension. A familiar, pressing discomfort. Like something was off, just out of sight, but very much in motion. So instead of heading to bed, I grabbed my keys, pulled on a zip-up hoodie over my joggers, and drove to the office. The building was mostly dark when I arrived, just a few emergency lights casting long, sterile shadows in the hallway. I didn't bother using the front entrance. I had clearance for the rear access elevator, the one that led straight to the basement level, the server room. That was my safe place. There's something meditative about humming machines, the gentle whir of processors at work. The chaos of the world couldn't survive in that silence. I swiped my badge, entered the secure PIN, and let the steel door click shut behind me. The room pulsed softly with quiet energy, lines of blue and green light blinking in steady rhythms. I dropped my bag on the floor and moved toward the central terminal. This wasn't just about peace of mind tonight. I opened our audit logs and began scanning employee data transfers. Nothing dramatic, just routine checks. Then a folder pinged yellow in the logs, flagged for external access. That wasn't typical. I expanded the log. The access ID belonged to Cherie. And the document? A Q2 budget draft, still in review, not finalized. I clicked further. She'd sent it to a personal Gmail. My stomach tightened, not from betrayal, but from something else. Predictability. There was no evidence of malicious intent. She hadn't forwarded it to a competitor or leaked it. Maybe she just wanted to study it more. Maybe she thought she'd impress someone by referencing internal projections in a meeting. But it didn't matter. It was against policy. And she knew better. "Still trying to shortcut your way in," I muttered, bookmarking the violation. I didn't act, not yet, but the line was getting thinner. I stood, stretching my arms, and moved to the opposite side of the server rack. The cool air brushed my skin, grounding me. I checked the backup mirror to ensure I was alone. I always checked, even though I'd never seen anyone here after hours. Until now. The echo of fast, deliberate footsteps snapped through the silence. I froze. The only person who would be down here this late was me, unless someone else had decided to go poking around. The door creaked. Heels, not sneakers, not boots. Heels. I stepped out from behind the rack just as Cherie stopped dead in her tracks at the doorway. Her breath hitched when she saw me. "What are you doing down here?" she asked sharply. Not surprised, suspicious. I didn't flinch. "Guess I have special access," I said calmly. Her eyes scanned the room, flicked toward the terminal behind me, then back to my face. She tried to compose herself, but I could tell her brain was already racing. "That doesn't answer my question." "You're not in a position to ask one." Her posture straightened, but before she could speak again, another voice rang out from the hallway. "Marlene, got a minute?" It was Derek holding a slim folder. He stepped inside casually, flipping open the cover. "Need your signature on the vendor pricing model." I reached for the folder without breaking eye contact with Cherie. She didn't move, just watched, like a curtain had finally been pulled and she wasn't sure what stage she was standing on anymore. Derek glanced between us. "You two met yet?" "No," I said flatly. Cherie didn't answer. I took the folder, signed on the last page, and handed it back. "Thanks," Derek nodded. "Take your time. I'll be upstairs." He left without another word. The door clicked shut again. Silence. Cherie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She stood there, eyes bouncing from the terminal to me, to the air between us that now felt impossibly charged. For the first time in our lives, she didn't look like my older sister. She looked like someone who'd been outplayed and didn't know when it happened. I didn't say anything else, just walked past her, bag slung over my shoulder. She turned to follow me with her eyes but didn't move. Let the doubt grow. It says more than I ever could. The next time I saw her outside of work was Saturday morning, at the same sun-washed corner table we'd gathered around since childhood. It was a brunch Claudine had insisted on, said she missed seeing us all together. I'd hesitated, but eventually gave in. Some routines, even the uncomfortable ones, still had a place in the family fabric. The cafe smelled like cinnamon waffles and brewed espresso. Cherie had already arrived, perched at the center of the table, loud and animated as usual, waving her mimosa like it was an accessory. She tossed around office lingo she'd barely begun to understand. Budget reallocation, strategic pivot, revenue forecast accuracy, strung together like pearls on a necklace she hadn't earned. Across the table, our Uncle Wendell chuckled mid-bite and leaned toward me. "You two working in the same place and not even talking about it? What are you, corporate spies now?" I smiled faintly but said nothing. Cherie laughed harder than necessary, flicking her hair over one shoulder. "Come on, Uncle W. It's not like I report to anyone important." I lowered my eyes to the steam curling from my coffee. She didn't know just how wrong she was. Later that weekend, I reviewed the quarterly prep deck from our finance team. Monday morning's internal sync was going to be a big one. I wasn't supposed to be in that meeting, not formally, but as head of infrastructure strategy, my signature was on every line item being discussed, so I decided to sit in. The meeting began like any other, projectors humming, people filing in, the sound of chairs scraping tile. Cherie walked in confidently with a click of her heels and set her laptop down at the head of the conference table. She began her portion of the presentation, Q3 projection overview, reading from her slides like she had practiced. Confident, articulate. For a moment, I almost thought she had it down. Then I saw the numbers. The revenue projection was off by a wide margin, not a rounding error, a full $180,000 discrepancy. I raised my hand. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me, some surprised I was even present. "That revenue line," I said evenly, "doesn't align with the pipeline inputs. We've been pulling from a new model since June." Cherie blinked, visibly caught off guard. It was based on the July forecast." "That version was deprecated," I said. "Check the access logs. The updated model is clearly time-stamped." She tried to pivot. "Well, I thought it was more accurate to show both versions." "But you didn't. You only showed the outdated one. That creates risk." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the AC unit. Her face turned a shade paler. Our director nodded. "We'll need that fixed before end of day. Good catch, Marlene." I said nothing more. I didn't enjoy the moment, but I didn't shrink from it either. As the meeting dispersed, I caught a glimpse of Cherie, still seated, her fingers motionless above her keyboard. For the first time, she wasn't performing. She looked cornered. That afternoon, I reviewed anonymous submissions for our internal innovation grant program. We'd recently launched it to encourage fresh ideas from all levels, regardless of title or tenure. One proposal stood out: tight structure, sharp financial logic, fresh angle on integrating team training into budget forecasting. It was easily the strongest of the batch. I marked it for immediate approval. 2 days later, HR pinged me to schedule a follow-up with the author. The name? Cherie Brown. I stared at the screen, lips parting just slightly. "Huh," I muttered. "Maybe there's more to her than I thought." Around the office, I started noticing subtle shifts. People no longer grouped her in the new hire category. They listened more carefully when she spoke. She wasn't exactly embraced, but she wasn't dismissed either. And Cherie? She no longer lingered in the break room like it was a stage. She came early, left late, talked less, observed more. I didn't approach her, not yet. But I watched, quietly, not out of judgment, but out of curiosity. Maybe this wasn't just a performance after all. Maybe something was changing. Then came the day she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. It started with a ping. A quiet alert on my desktop just after 8:13 p.m. I was finishing up my notes for an investor call the next morning when the compliance system flagged a red item. Restricted document sent to external contact. At first, I thought it might be a misclassification. Our system sometimes caught false positives, new vendors, third-party consultants. But when I opened the report and traced the access path, the sender's name stopped me cold. Cherie. I stared at the entry, her company email address, time-stamped, logged, the document in question, a preliminary proposal containing sensitive financial forecasts tied to a pitch for one of our most high-value clients, and the recipient? A third-party vendor, not yet under NDA. Someone she'd been coordinating with for visual materials, probably trying to make her presentation more slick. My chest tightened. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't some innocent misstep like using the wrong spreadsheet in a rush. This was careless, arrogant, dangerous. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd sprinted past it, eyes closed, with no sense of consequence. I didn't react immediately. I just sat there staring at the screen, letting the reality harden in my mind. Then I stood, grabbed my phone, and walked out of the apartment. The air outside was cold, sharp enough to sting. I drove straight to the office. Derek's car was still in the lot, his light still on. He worked late as often as I did. When I knocked on his door, he looked up with that quiet concern he reserved for moments like this. "Got a sec?" I asked. He nodded and closed his laptop halfway. "Always." I stepped inside and dropped the printout onto his desk. He scanned the highlighted line, his brow furrowing halfway down the page. "She forwarded that?" he asked. I nodded. "From her company email, to an outside vendor. They haven't signed anything." He let out a low whistle and leaned back in his chair. "That's not just sloppy. That's a breach." I folded my arms. "She's crossing lines like they don't exist." "You knew this was coming," Derek said after a pause, voice even. "The only question is, how far will you let it go?" He sipped his coffee, watching me. "You've been protecting her in silence," he continued. "Maybe it's time she sees who she's really dealing with." He wasn't wrong. I had let it slide. I told myself it was to observe, to study her under pressure. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of turning into her. Afraid that doing what needed to be done would make me cruel, cold, unforgiving. But it wasn't cruelty that fueled me tonight. It was accountability. Later, back at my apartment, I sat down in the glow of my monitor and opened a new HR incident report. It asked for the subject. I typed, Sherry Brown. It asked for the incident category. I selected, policy violation, confidential data mishandling, and in the summary section, I kept it brief. Document, FY26 budget forecast, vendor forward without clearance. Breach, external sharing prior to NDA. I attached the compliance log and clicked forward. The to-field autofilled Derek's address. Above the message body, I wrote one sentence, no more warnings. Then I hit send. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle around me. Outside, the city pulsed like a distant heartbeat. But inside, I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret. She'd earned the fallout. And I wasn't going to catch her this time. Still, I didn't expect her to stay quiet. She came for my credibility next. The hallway was quiet, eerily so for mid-morning. Fluorescent lights hummed low above polished tile, casting dull reflections off the company's wall of founders. Most people walked by it without a second glance. But not her. Cherie had been on her way to finance, arms full of reports, phone in hand, when her stride slowed, then stopped. Her gaze locked on the glass panel that lined the far wall, elegantly etched with names, titles, and founding years. Legacy set in stone, or in this case, laser cut into tempered glass. And there it was, Marlene Kamerick, co-founder, chief technical architect, 2019. I watched it unfold from my office's camera display, a private feed only a handful of people even knew existed. I didn't need audio to read the moment on her face. Her body stilled, her chest rose with a sharp inhale, and her shoulders pulled back like she'd been slapped. She stood frozen, not blinking, not moving. The clipboard in her hand lowered slightly. She wasn't holding it anymore. She was holding realization. It took her several seconds before she stepped away. She didn't go into finance. She didn't even check her phone. She just walked. Later that afternoon, as the office buzzed with its usual low hum, keyboard taps, soft laughter, printer whirs, I saw Cherie again in the employee lounge. She was standing by the coffee machine when Samira, one of our newer analysts, walked up holding a sandwich. "Oh my God," Samira gushed. "Are you the one who's close to Marlene?" Cherie blinked. "Excuse me?" "You know, like, close. We all figured. I mean, you're new, but you came in strong. I heard from Ops that Derek signed off on your hire personally." Cherie's expression shifted instantly. Not confusion this time. Something else, calculation. Samira continued, oblivious. "Kinda wild, right? No one's ever seen her. Some people thought she didn't even exist, but you? You're clearly connected." There was a beat. Cherie smiled, tight and thin. You hear a lot of things around here. Still, if you are close to her, Samira added, lowering her voice slightly, some folks think you might be next in line for leadership. You know, if anything changes. I paused the feed right there. Even through the distance of a lens, I could feel it. Cherie wasn't just absorbing the rumor. She was deciding whether to wear it like armor or use it like a blade. It didn't take long to find out which. By 4:15 that same day, she stormed into HR. I wasn't in the building, but the call came through immediately from Lila at the front desk. Marlene, she's here. She wants to know who's been touching her financial reports. Did anyone tell her? She demanded access logs. She says someone's been undermining her role. And did you give her the names? She saw yours. We didn't hide anything. She looked upset. Good, I said softly. She should be. Later that evening, I watched the surveillance recording. Cherie at the HR counter, her voice rising, hands braced hard against the desk, face flushed with something more volatile than anger. Betrayal. She's been reviewing my work? She said, incredulous. My sister? I've been working under her this whole damn time? It wasn't just shock. It was a slow, humiliating unraveling. She turned abruptly and walked out, not toward the elevator, not toward her desk. She needed air, maybe space, maybe time. But what she needed didn't matter anymore. I sat at my console, watching the footage rewind, then play again, slower this time. Not because I wanted to savor it. I wasn't gloating. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was closure. And maybe just a little justice. It had never been about hiding from her. Not really. It was about seeing what she'd become when she thought I wasn't watching. It was about proving, to both of us, that identity doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs truth. And when the truth came out, she didn't fold. She fought back, hard. The invitation came 2 weeks earlier, slipped into my inbox between performance reviews and code deployment approvals. A clean corporate header, an elegant serif font. Stradley's 5-year anniversary celebration, executive recognition ceremony. I hovered over the RSVP for a full day before clicking yes. Not because I needed the attention, but because I finally stopped hiding. The day arrived with Carolina blue skies and air heavy with summer. The company's 10th floor was transformed. Linen-covered tables, champagne flutes, the scent of catered hors d'oeuvres wafting through the lobby. I wore black, tailored, structured, calm, a reminder that I was never just a technician in a hoodie. Derek took the mic near the end of the program. He spoke about growth, resilience, and innovation, pausing with a glance toward me. And now, he said, I want to introduce the real mind behind our tech, the one who's been shaping this company from behind the curtain, a quiet force, a brilliant one. He turned, arm outstretched. Marlene Kaczmarek. Applause, hesitant at first, then growing, row by row, like a wave finding momentum. I stepped onto the stage. Across the room I saw her, my mother, Claudine. Her eyes blinked rapidly as if adjusting focus. Next to her, Wendell's expression twitched somewhere between disbelief and embarrassment. Cherie wasn't in the crowd. Not yet. But she'd hear. I spoke briefly. No theatrics, just acknowledgement of the team, of our journey, of the code that had become something more than syntax. It became structure. When I stepped off the stage, the room buzzed with questions. Some eyes followed me like they'd just learned a secret, some like they'd just solved a riddle. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Claudine caught up to me, her heels tapped nervously against the tile. Why didn't you tell us? I turned to her. Would it have changed how you saw me? There was no defense in her face, no sharpness, just something softer. She nodded once, small, but enough. Wendell wandered over next, tugging at his collar. Didn't think coding could build an empire, I smiled. Didn't think silence could say so much either. He chuckled, uncertain. Then left. That evening, long after the lights dimmed and the crowd dissipated, I returned to my office. The space was dimly lit, calm. I powered on my screen. Notifications blinked. One stood out. Quarterly forecast adjusted per your comments. Thanks for the correction. S. Brown. No emojis, no fluff, just plain text. But it was the first time she'd ever acknowledged an error, No deflection, no sarcasm, just responsibility. Attached was a revised forecast, every line double-checked, no rounding slips, no padded assumptions. It was solid. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled beneath my chin. Something had shifted, not loudly, quietly. I closed my laptop and stepped out onto the rooftop. The air was cooler up there, softer. The city stretched beneath me, glowing like static fire. And then I saw her. Cherie stood at the far edge, hands resting on the railing. She didn't turn when I approached. "You win," she said. "It wasn't a game." A pause, then her voice lower. "I wasn't trying to be better than you, I just wanted to be seen." I moved beside her. "Well, now they see me, loud and clear." She turned. For once no smirk, no raised brow, just eyes, tired maybe, but clear. There wasn't a hug. There wasn't forgiveness spelled out in warm, sweeping dialogue, but there was acknowledgement, a shared silence, and sometimes that's all there is. And sometimes that's enough. Still, as I stood beside her, city humming beneath us, wind catching the edges of her blazer, I knew something else too. Respect doesn't erase wounds, and healing doesn't always come with closure. Monday morning carried that same quiet tension it always did, the kind of low buzz that hinted things were about to move, just not yet. My inbox was already stacked, notifications popping up like popcorn, meetings, deadlines, flagged emails, another packed day. Then one notification stood out. New CSR proposal submitted, review pending approval. I clicked it without much thought. But this one didn't land like the others. Touch the screen, touch the future. A mentorship program for young women in underrepresented tech communities. It was a solid concept. Clean, grounded, long-term. But it wasn't the idea that got me. It was the author, Cherie Brown. I paused, read it again. Then my eyes dropped to the last line, tucked into the margin almost like an afterthought. Inspired by the quiet mission of Marlene Kasmarek. That stopped me cold. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. Not a tribute, not a plea, just a nod. A quiet recognition. Like someone saying, "I saw what you did," even when no one else did. I sat back, staring at the screen. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a mirror held up to something I'd long put away. Not for closure, just for distance. I approved it. Not out of obligation or emotion. It was simply good, strategic, grounded, worth doing. 2 days later, the quarterly review brought us all into the boardroom. Fluorescent lights, sterile walls, that stale air of long meetings. Derek sat beside me, impassive. Cherie was 3 seats down, notebook open, focused. No theater, no flash. Wendell, newly semi-retired but still clinging to authority like a second skin, flipped through the CSR packets with a smirk. Then he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. Bit much giving credit to someone who doesn't even like the spotlight, no? The room hushed. Not dramatic, just still. Cherie looked up, calm. "Actually," she said, "some of the most powerful people I know say the least, and do the most." She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The weight was in the restraint. No one responded. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full. A kind of shift you could feel more than name. I didn't jump in. Didn't need to. She didn't look at me, but there was a glance, indirect but clear. Not a request. Not even a connection. Just alignment. Like she wasn't covering me, but standing beside the truth. The week blurred forward. Tasks, calls, the usual chaos. Then Sunday came again. Family brunch, same cafe, same wobbly table, same plastic-coated menus from a decade ago. I walked in late. Cherie was already there, dressed down, flats, denim, hair tucked behind one ear. A mimosa at her side, her notebook half open. This wasn't work mode. This was just her. The small talk dragged. Gas prices, weather, election rumors. I kept quiet, chewing slowly. Then Wendell lowered his paper and asked, "You still doing that freelance data thing?" Before I could answer, Cherie cut in. "Uncle, she runs the company I now work for. The one whose tools you use to file your taxes." Flat, factual. Forks paused midair. No one knew where to look. Then Claudine, always quiet, reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Just a touch. No words, no performative grace, And somehow, that was enough. That night I walked home, letting the breeze carry the weight of the day. The mural on Davidson Street came into view, faces painted across brick, voices of the past frozen in color. I stopped. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter, but I didn't feel invisible anymore either. Maybe justice isn't about getting the last word. Maybe it's about not needing to. Maybe healing doesn't come with big declarations. Maybe it's the small shifts, the way someone who once talked over you starts listening. At the corner, I whispered, to myself, to the night. We don't have to go back to being sisters the way we were. A pause. But at least now she sees me, and that's a start. Sometimes the hardest place to be seen is in the spaces closest to us, the ones we call home, the families we come from, the workplaces we've helped carry on our backs. You can show up, work hard, stay loyal, and still feel invisible. For years, I chased a kind of recognition that never came. I thought if I just kept my head down, if I stayed quiet and steady, someone would notice. That my silence was a kind of strength. That dignity meant never demanding anything, not attention, not space, not even credit. But here's what I know now. Silence without boundaries doesn't protect you. It erases you. And waiting for others to hand you your worth is a game you'll never win, because it was never theirs to give in the first place. Through my own experience, both personal and professional, I've come to understand something I wish someone had told me sooner. You don't need anyone's permission to take up space. You don't need approval to be powerful. And sometimes, the boldest kind of justice isn't a confrontation. It's simply showing up as your full self, unapologetically, while the people who once overlooked you slowly realize they were wrong. Maybe you've been underestimated. Maybe you've made yourself small to avoid tension. Maybe you've downplayed your voice just to keep the peace. If any of that feels familiar, let this be your sign. You don't have to shrink anymore. You don't have to wait for the right moment to stand tall. Be the version of yourself they never expected, and let them catch up, because you're not too much. You're not too loud. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for exactly what you've earned: respect, recognition, and room to breathe. Now I want to turn this over to you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, or like your work and worth were overlooked in your job? What was the moment that shifted something for you? Not to prove anything to others, but to finally choose yourself. I want to hear your story. Drop a 1 in the comments if any of this hit home, or let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm always reading, and I'm always listening. And if this video gave you even the tiniest spark, even if it was just a quiet, steady yes inside your chest, hit that subscribe button. There's more coming, more stories, more truths. Because this isn't just about me anymore, it's about us. And I'm just getting started.